area of the island that we're going to look at on this video is just here at Moelfre. There we go. Now you may remember the video on the wreck of the Royal Charter that I did, which centred on the village of Moelfre, and the wreck was in that bay there. What we're going to look at in this video are these three ancient features close to Moelfre. I'll just get the map to change. There we are. So we're going to begin at Capel Lligwy, which is there. That little square there is the chapel. We actually parked here and walked through the field, across the field to it, and then when we left the chapel we walked towards these trees, and in the middle of these trees is a clearing, and within the clearing is Capel Lligwy settlement. So we're going to have another look at that, and when we've finished there we're going to go back to the road, walk up the road for about a quarter of a mile perhaps, and have a look at the Lligwy burial chamber, which is just there, and that's where we are relative to Moelfre. You may remember that on the Royal Charter video I also went up to Llanelgo to look at the church there, where the Reverend Rhys Hughes was buried, and a lot of the victims from the Royal Charter were taken and subsequently buried. But we're not going to look at that, we're going to look at these three ancient monuments here. And here's a satellite image of the area, just showing the three features that we're going to look at. We're looking at Capel Lligwy, which is about a mile and a half from Moelfre, and it overlooks Lligwy Bay on the eastern side of the island, and it's one of three ancient historical sites in this locality, and we're going to look at all three while we're here. So this is the chapel, and it's 12th century. It is only the lower parts of the walls that are 12th century. The upper parts and the gable ends of the chapel are 14th century. You can see the difference in the masonry if you look carefully at this point. And on the walls inside the chapel there are traces of the original render. The first thing that you see when you walk through the door is this large lump of stone, and it's thought that this was the base for a churchyard cross at some point, that it's been moved inside the chapel. Then at the chancel end there's a small vault, some steps leading down to a small vault. It's not very high, you can't stand up down there. I didn't go in, but it's a little vault there just off the side of the chancel. We leave the chapel behind and go across this field to an Iron Age settlement, or at least it's thought that it's Iron Age. And this is the Capel Lligwy hut group. And through the trees we emerge into the open,
look at the hut group. It's quite impressive.
So this is a ground plan of the hut group inside the enclosure. You can see it's surrounded by an enclosing wall. I'm about to walk in near where the compass point is, where it says modern entrance, and you can see that there are 2 roundhouses and 3 rectangular buildings that we're going to look at now.
So the interpretation board tells us that this was occupied during the Roman occupation, and there's a mix of Iron Age and Roman styles of building. This is a roundhouse, albeit in stone, and beyond it is a rectangular building. The area in the middle would have been like a communal area, and there's a rectangular building, a smaller one, and there's one here slightly longer at the top end, and then in this corner there's another roundhouse. Which can be easily identified from there. And at the time of occupation, this site would have been open. It wouldn't have had trees around it, and therefore they've been able to see out to sea from here and north and south as well. And the people that occupied this site were the indigenous Anglesey farmers, albeit under Roman authority. There's a little information panel showing the roundhouse, but they're very substantially built. When you look at the wall thicknesses, I suppose there was an abundance of stone locally, which helped. But look at that wall. That's a cavity wall, plus a bit, isn't it? With rubble fill. And that's another long house with the entrance here and steps down into it. Remarkable survivors of Roman Britain, but not Roman in terms of occupation. And that's an impression of what it may have looked like on one of the interpretation panels. Certainly an impressive sight when you look at the size of the stones that were carried here to build these buildings. So that's Capel Lligwy hut group. The next monument is about a quarter of a mile down this lane from where the hut group was at Lligwy. You may just be able to make it out over the hedge. Lligwy burial chamber, which, as the board says, was erected towards the end of the Neolithic age for the communal burial of the dead. It was probably covered originally by a mound of earth or stones, and it's just here. Suitably fenced off, which is correct. But it's stated that that capstone weighs 25 tons. How the dickens did they get that on there? That is unbelievable. Absolutely incredible. Look at the size of that. And there's the interpretation board, which says this small burial chamber was constructed around 5,000 years ago at the end of the Neolithic. It contained the bones of up to 30 men, women and children. It would have originally been covered with a mound of turf and soil. The local farming community enlarged a natural gap in the limestone pavement to create the burial chamber. It says that the capstone was probably levered up from this site. It probably originated on this site rather than being brought here, which is believable, isn't it? And the smaller upright stones were wedged beneath it to raise it above the gap. That's plausible. So that is Lligwy burial chamber near Moelfre, the third ancient monument in this area. You can see how the earth inside has been hollowed out to create the tomb. I don't know whether the camera's picking it up, but just inside there's a drop of about, I don't know, 2 to 3 feet below the surrounding level of the field. We're now on the north side, so the sun's a little bit into the camera, but that looks like the entrance there. The one we saw near Holyhead had a north facing entrance as well, so that may be significant.